My name is Daniel Carter, and I am 38 years old. I never imagined that death could be the beginning of something greater than life itself. But on October 17, 2023, my world was shattered. I died. I remember the moment my heart stopped, my body growing cold as my soul drifted into a realm beyond human comprehension. I stood in the presence of an overwhelming light, and there before me stood Jesus Christ himself. His eyes, filled with love and authority, looked deep into my soul, and then he spoke. What he revealed to me about Black people, our history, our divine purpose, and the truth hidden from the world, shook me to my core. This testimony is not just my story. It is a divine message that the world needs to hear. Are you ready for the truth? Because what Jesus showed me will change everything you thought you knew. My name is Daniel Carter, and I am 38 years old. What I'm about to share is something I never thought I'd experience, let alone live to tell. It all started on a day that seemed just like any other. There were no warnings, no signs from the heavens, no premonitions. If someone had told me that day would be my last on earth, I would have laughed it off. But in a single moment, everything changed. I remember feeling a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. At first, I thought it was just stress or maybe something I ate. But the pain intensified, spreading like fire through my body. My breath became shallow. My vision blurred, and before I could fully grasp what was happening, the world around me started to fade. I heard muffled voices, panicked shouting, and then, a deep silence. The silence wasn't empty, it was thick, as if it had a presence of its own. My body felt weightless, yet I was fully aware. I knew, without a doubt, that I was no longer inside the limits of my physical self. A strange sensation washed over me, as if I had been unplugged from something heavy. Then, in an instant, I was outside of my body, looking down at myself. The sight was disturbing. My body lay lifeless on the floor, people rushing around, trying to revive me. I should have felt fear, but I didn't. Instead, an overwhelming sense of peace surrounded me. I wasn't struggling, I wasn't gasping for air, I was simply observing. The reality of my death settled in, but rather than terror, I felt curiosity. I was more alive than I had ever been. Then, something shifted. I felt a force, gentle yet powerful, pulling me away from the scene. It was as if I was being drawn into another realm, effortlessly floating towards something unseen. The world around me stretched and blurred, colors bleeding into each other like watercolors on a canvas. Then, in an instant, I was in complete darkness. But this darkness wasn't empty. It had depth, a consciousness that seemed to pulse around me. I had no sense of time. Seconds, minutes, or even hours could have passed. Then, suddenly, a pinprick of light appeared in the distance. It was faint at first, like a tiny star in an infinite void, but it grew brighter and closer with each passing moment. The light wasn't just light, it was alive. It carried an overwhelming presence, something beyond human understanding. As it approached, I felt a warmth unlike anything on earth. It wasn't just physical warmth. It was emotional, spiritual, a warmth that filled the deepest, loneliest parts of my soul. Then, I heard something. A sound so beautiful, so pure, it was as if it carried the essence of creation itself. At first, it was a soft hum, then voices, singing. The sound grew, surrounding me in waves of harmony, unlike any music I had ever heard. The language was unfamiliar, yet my soul understood it. The melodies carried a message, not in words, but in feeling. Love, joy, peace, a sense of home. I was moving toward the light. Though I wasn't walking, it felt more like being drawn, as if the light was calling me home. The closer I got, the more I felt an intense presence, one that knew me. Every part of me, my thoughts, my regrets, my deepest secrets. I was completely exposed, yet there was no judgment. Only love. Then, in an instant, I was standing in a place I cannot fully describe. The closest words I can find are a realm of pure beauty and majesty. The air was alive, the colors richer than anything on earth. I could feel the ground beneath me, yet it wasn't solid in the way we understand. It pulsed with energy, as if it, too, was alive. I turned, and that's when I saw him. At first, I could only see the brilliance of his presence. Light radiated from him, not like fire, but like pure love made visible. Then, as my vision adjusted, I saw him clearly, Jesus. His eyes. That was the first thing that struck me. They weren't just looking at me, they were looking through me, into the depths of my being. And yet, there was no fear, no shame, only an unfathomable love. Love deeper than oceans, wider than the sky, stronger than anything I had ever known. He didn't speak, not with words, but I heard him. His voice resonated inside me, like a soundless whisper that carried the weight of eternity. I felt myself fall to my knees, not because I was forced to, but because his presence was too overwhelming to stand before. It wasn't fear that made me kneel, it was awe. Every part of me recognized him, not just as Jesus, but as the source of all things. My soul had always known him, even when my mind had not. Then, he reached out. His hand, scarred yet radiant, stretched toward me. As soon as his fingers touched my shoulder, a rush of knowledge, understanding, and truth filled me. It wasn't just information, it was revelation. Memories I had long buried surfaced. I saw every moment of my life, not in a flash, but in detail. Every choice, every word, every thought, I saw them from a new perspective. I felt the impact of my actions, not just on myself, but on others. The love I had given, the pain I had caused, it was all there. But instead of condemnation, there was clarity. Jesus wasn't showing me my past to punish me. He was revealing it so I could understand. Then, the vision expanded. I saw beyond my own life. I saw humanity itself. The way we live, the things we chase, the illusions we believe in. I saw how blind we are to the true reality of existence. We think life is about survival, success, or status, but it's so much more. I saw the chains that bind people, the unseen forces that manipulate minds, the distractions that keep us from the truth. I saw how easily we accept lies, how willingly we turn away from the light in favor of shadows. Then, Jesus spoke again. Not in words, but in truth itself. A truth so overwhelming, it shook my soul. He was about to reveal something. Something about the world, about people, about a reality hidden from most. The moment I found myself in front of Jesus, every question I had ever asked about life, death, and existence no longer mattered. Everything within me recognized him instantly, as if my soul had always known him, even before my birth. His presence was overwhelming, not in a forceful way, but in the way that sunlight effortlessly overtakes darkness. His very existence exuded authority, yet he was not distant or unapproachable. He was personal, intimate, as if he had been waiting for me all along. I tried to take in the sight before me, but my human understanding felt inadequate. His light was not just light, it was love, truth, and power intertwined in a way I could not separate. It wasn't something he had, it was something he was. His eyes, though filled with infinite wisdom, carried an undeniable tenderness. They were not the eyes of a distant king sitting upon a high throne, but the eyes of someone who had walked the same earth, who had known pain, who had seen suffering, and who had overcome it all. I felt my knees weaken beneath me, and without hesitation, I fell. Not out of fear, but because my soul could not stand in the presence of such holiness. I had spent my whole life trying to find meaning in temporary things, yet here, in this moment, I realized that this was the meaning I had been searching for. As I knelt, waves of something indescribable washed over me. It was more than peace, more than comfort. It was as if the very fabric of my existence was being restored, like I had been broken and was now being made whole again. Then, he spoke. His voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It did not simply enter my ears, it entered my very being. It was a voice that carried the weight of eternity, a voice that spoke with authority yet with a gentleness that soothed every fear. It was not just sound, it was understanding. With every word, truth was embedded into me, not as knowledge, but as experience. I had questions, so many questions. But before I could even think of asking, he already knew. His gaze deepened, and suddenly, I felt something stir within me. It was as if my soul was being laid bare, every part of me exposed, not just my actions, but my thoughts, my motives, my deepest secrets. I had spent years justifying things to myself, convincing myself that certain choices were necessary, certain sins excusable. But here, before him, there were no excuses. There was only truth. I expected judgment. I expected shame. But instead, what I felt was love, a love so pure, so undeserved, that it shattered me. How could he look at me, knowing everything I had done, and still love me? I had spent my life thinking that love was something I had to earn, something that could be taken away if I failed. But his love was unchanging. It was not based on what I had done, but on who he was. And then, he showed me something. It wasn't a vision, at least not in the way we understand visions. It was more like an unveiling. Suddenly, I was seeing reality as it truly was, beyond the physical world I had always known. I saw the spiritual realm, not as a distant place, but as something woven into everything. I saw the forces that influence the world, the battles that rage beyond human sight. I saw how every decision, every thought, and every action was tied to something greater. I had always believed that life was about making choices based on what I could see and feel, but here, I understood that every choice had eternal weight. Then, he turned his gaze toward me, and instantly, I was pulled into something deeper. I felt as if I was being taken through time itself. I saw moments from my past, not as memories, but as if I were reliving them. But this time, I saw them through his eyes. I saw the moments where I had hurt others, not just in action, but in thought. I saw the impact of words I had carelessly spoken, the unseen wounds I had inflicted. I saw the people I had ignored, the opportunities I had wasted. But I also saw moments of kindness, times when I had unknowingly been a vessel of his love. Every choice, whether good or bad, rippled far beyond what I had imagined. Then, I saw something even greater. I saw the weight of human suffering, not just my own, but the suffering of all people. I saw the cries of the oppressed, the prayers of the broken, the desperation of those who had lost hope. I saw how darkness had woven itself into the world, how deception had blinded so many. I saw the way people had been led away from truth, chasing after illusions that could never satisfy them. And then, he began to reveal something that I never expected. I felt a shift, as if I were being drawn toward a specific part of this vision. I saw the history of humanity unfolding before me, moments that had been hidden, truths that had been buried. I saw how certain groups of people had been targeted, not just by the physical forces of the world, but by the spiritual forces working behind them. I saw how a great deception had been placed over humanity, especially over certain people. I saw chains, not physical chains, but spiritual ones. I saw the ways in which history had been rewritten, truths concealed, identities stolen. Then, I saw his tears. It wasn't the kind of weeping that came from weakness. It was the mourning of someone who had watched his beloved suffer for far too long. It was the pain of a father seeing his children lost, held captive by lies. It was a sorrow so deep that it could shake the very foundations of existence. And in that moment, I understood something that I had never grasped before. I understood why the world was the way it was. I understood why certain people had suffered more than others, why certain truths had been hidden, why so much effort had been made to erase history and replace it with deception. I saw the spiritual war that had been raging for centuries, a war not fought with swords and guns, but with ideas, with false teachings, with the manipulation of truth. I saw the strategy of the enemy, how he had worked to divide people, to make them forget who they were, to make them believe they were worthless, insignificant. Then, I saw a moment in time where everything would change. I saw a great awakening, a time when truth would no longer be hidden, when those who had been deceived would see. I saw people breaking free from the chains that had bound them for generations. And in that moment, I realized that everything I had seen was leading to something greater. As I stood before Jesus, still overwhelmed by the depth of his presence, I felt something shift. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and a flood of understanding washed over me. I knew he was about to show me something that had been hidden from the world, something that had been distorted, buried, or outright erased from history. There was a weight to the moment, a divine gravity that made my entire being tremble. Without words, he led me into a vision. I was no longer standing where I had been. Instead, I was moving through time itself, watching history unfold before me as though I were present in each moment. I saw civilizations rise and fall, people being scattered, territories changing hands, and nations being built upon the suffering of others. But my focus wasn't on any single event, it was on a particular people, a group whose story had been rewritten and manipulated for centuries. I saw a people who had once walked in divine favor, a people deeply connected to God, living in harmony with His laws and ways. These people were strong, filled with wisdom, possessing knowledge that had been passed down from generation to generation. I saw them thriving, not in the way the world defines wealth, but in a way that was deeply spiritual. Their communities were rich with culture, their lives filled with purpose, their connection to God unshaken. They understood who they were. They understood their role in creation. They carried something within them, a mark, a calling, a divine inheritance. But then, I saw a shift. I saw forces rise against them, not just human forces, but spiritual ones. There was an intentional effort to sever their connection to their divine identity, to erase their knowledge of who they were. I saw how deception was woven into their history, how their truths were replaced with lies, how their stories were rewritten. I saw the destruction of their cities, the scattering of their families, the breaking of their spirits. I watched as they were enslaved, taken from their lands, stripped of their names, their culture, their heritage. I saw them crying out to God, confused, lost, wondering why such suffering had come upon them. I felt their pain as if it were my own. They were made to believe they were nothing, that they were cursed, that they were inferior. But I also saw the truth that had been hidden from them for so long. These people were not abandoned. They were not forsaken. They were not cursed. They were chosen. I saw how their suffering had been orchestrated, how darkness had deliberately worked against them because of who they were. I saw how the world had been taught to look down on them, to mock them, to devalue them. But I also saw how they carried something special, something powerful, something the enemy desperately wanted to suppress. I saw them in chains, both physical and spiritual, but I also saw the glow of something within them that could never be extinguished. Despite the attempts to erase them, to break them, to turn them into something they were not, they endured. The enemy had tried to wipe them out, but they survived. The world had tried to silence them, but their voices still echoed through history. Jesus showed me how they were scattered across the earth, forced into lands not their own, their identities stolen, their names changed. He showed me how even in their suffering, they continued to influence the world in ways they didn't even realize. I saw how their presence alone carried a power that others feared, a power they themselves had forgotten. I saw how they were at the center of so much, yet they were treated as if they were at the bottom. I saw how their inventions, their creativity, their endurance had shaped the world, and yet their contributions were minimized or stolen. I saw how they were taught to hate themselves, to turn against each other, to embrace the false narratives given to them. But in all of this, I also saw hope. Jesus revealed to me that the suffering of these people was not because they were weak, but because they were strong. The enemy does not attack what is worthless, he attacks what is powerful. These people had been under such immense spiritual attack not because they were cursed, but because they carried something that threatened the kingdom of darkness. Then, I saw something even more profound. I saw how, despite everything, they still sought after God. Even when they had been stripped of their original languages, even when they had been taught twisted versions of faith, even when they had been fed lies, their spirits still reached for Him. There was something in their blood, something in their souls that could never be fully taken from them. I saw how their music carried divine frequencies, how their voices resonated with something ancient, something eternal. I saw how their resilience was not just human strength, but something supernatural. Even when they did not fully know their identity, they still reflected the image of the one who had created them. Then, Jesus spoke, and though His words were not like human speech, I understood them in my soul. He told me that these people had been scattered, but they were not forgotten. He told me that their identity had been stolen, but it would be restored. He told me that though they had been made to believe they were lost, they had always been found. I saw how they had been falsely labeled, how their history had been twisted to make them think they came from nothing. But Jesus revealed that they came from something greater than they had ever imagined. He showed me that they were not just a people who had been enslaved, not just a people who had suffered, but a people who had been chosen for something greater. I saw a shift beginning to happen. I saw knowledge returning to them, light breaking through the darkness that had covered them for so long. I saw young men and women awakening to truths that had been hidden from them. I saw elders remembering things they had been forced to forget. I saw them rising, not in rebellion, not in vengeance, but in revelation. The world had tried to define them, but God was about to reveal who they truly were. I saw how the system that had been built to keep them down would not be able to hold them anymore. I saw how the world would begin to take notice, how the things that had been hidden would come to light. I saw how even those who had once looked down on them would begin to realize the truth. I saw how they would reclaim their place, not through force, but through divine awakening. I saw how their voices would once again speak truth, how their hands would once again build what had been destroyed. I saw how their prayers, which had been whispered in pain for generations, would be answered in ways they never expected. I saw that they were not just a people, they were a prophecy. They were a fulfillment of something written long before the world had tried to erase them. They had been through fire, but they were not consumed. They had been through storms, but they were not drowned. They had been through darkness, but they were not overcome. I understood then why Jesus was revealing this to me. This was not just about history, this was about destiny. This was about the fulfillment of something divine, something that had been in motion since the beginning of time. I saw that these people were not forgotten. I saw that their story was not over. I saw that the greatest part of their journey was still yet to come. I found myself caught in a vision unlike any other, a revelation that transcended time itself. The past, present, and future unfolded before me as if they were all happening at once. Jesus stood beside me, his presence overwhelming yet gentle, his gaze filled with sorrow and hope at the same time. He was about to reveal something that had been hidden from the eyes of the world, something that, if known, would change everything. The vision opened with scenes of ancient civilizations, great kingdoms filled with knowledge, wisdom, and divine connection. I saw cities built with precision beyond human understanding, structures aligned with the stars, and societies governed not by greed or oppression but by spiritual order. These were not the primitive people history had often painted them to be. They were scholars, mathematicians, architects, and warriors of faith. They understood the balance of nature, the movement of the heavens, and the laws of the spiritual realm. I saw a people who walked closely with God, a people whose lineage was tied to something sacred. They were entrusted with knowledge that had since been lost, knowledge that explained the mysteries of existence, of the universe, of the divine. They knew their origin. They knew their purpose. But then, something happened. A shift took place. I watched as external forces moved in, first with subtlety, then with violence. I saw manipulation at work, slow and deliberate. False doctrines were introduced, rewritten histories began to spread, and the once unshakable faith of these people was gradually eroded. A great deception had begun. I saw their lands invaded, their temples burned, their culture erased piece by piece. It wasn't just a physical conquest, it was spiritual warfare. The knowledge they had once possessed was either stolen or destroyed, and what remained was repackaged and sold back to them in twisted forms. Their connection to the divine was severed, their identity fragmented, and they were left wandering in a world that no longer reflected the truth of who they were. Then, I saw the horrors of slavery, not just as an institution of forced labor, but as a system designed to break the very spirit of these people. It wasn't just about chains and whips, it was about erasing their past so they would never remember their true purpose. They were given new names, new gods, and a new narrative that convinced them they had always been at the bottom. I saw them crying out to the heavens, their prayers filled with confusion and pain. I saw generations born into oppression, carrying burdens they never understood, struggling under a weight that had been placed upon them long before their birth. But then, Jesus showed me something deeper, something hidden beneath the suffering. I saw a thread, a divine thread, that connected them to something greater than their oppression. Even in the midst of their pain, they still carried something within them. Their voices still resonated with power. Their hands still created. Their minds still sought wisdom. No matter how much was taken from them, there was something that could never be erased. I watched as history continued, as they adapted, survived, and resisted in ways that were unseen. They built, they sang, they worshipped, even when the world told them they were nothing. Their resilience was supernatural. Their endurance was not merely human strength, it was divine preservation. The vision shifted again, and I saw the present world, the state of things as they are now. I saw how these people still suffered, still struggled under systems designed to keep them blind to their true identity. I saw how they had been fed distractions, kept busy with things that had no eternal value. I saw how many had been led astray, how some had given up, how some had embraced the very lies created to keep them lost. Yet, there was something stirring. A shift was happening again, but this time, it was in their favor. I saw awakening. I saw eyes being opened, chains breaking, knowledge returning. I saw them remembering, not in an intellectual way, but in a spiritual way. It was as if something buried deep within them was resurfacing, something ancient yet familiar. They were beginning to see through the deception. They were beginning to ask questions, to seek truth beyond what they had been taught. I saw a hunger rising within them, a longing for something real, something more than the world had offered them. They were tired of falsehood. They were tired of being told who they were by those who had no right to define them. Then, Jesus revealed the future. I saw them standing up, not in rebellion, not in violence, but in authority. I saw leaders emerging, not politicians or celebrities, but true spiritual leaders, those who carried wisdom beyond their years, those who spoke truth without fear. I saw communities rebuilding, families restoring, knowledge being passed down again. I saw them breaking free from cycles of destruction, reclaiming what had been lost. I saw their influence spreading, not through power as the world understands it, but through transformation. Their music carried messages of awakening. Their art spoke of their true history. Their inventions, their ideas, their voices, they were shaping the world in ways they had been prevented from doing for centuries. The nations of the world began to take notice. Those who had once mocked them now looked to them for answers. Those who had once oppressed them now sought their wisdom. The same systems that had been used to suppress them began to crumble, not by force, but because they could no longer sustain themselves in the presence of truth. I saw those who had been lost return home, not just physically, but spiritually. I saw them reconnecting with God in a way they had not known for generations. I saw them stepping into their divine role, embracing their purpose. They were no longer ashamed. They were no longer afraid. They knew who they were. And then, I saw the final fulfillment of their journey. I saw them standing in glory, clothed in light, walking in unity, their voices lifted in praise. I saw them restored, not just as individuals, but as a people, as a nation beyond borders. I saw them in their rightful place, fulfilling a destiny that had been written long before the world had tried to erase it. I understood now why their history had been hidden, why they had been attacked so relentlessly. It was because of who they were. It was because of what they carried. It was because the enemy knew that if they ever discovered the truth, they would change the world. And now, that time had come. Jesus stood before me, his presence radiating a love so deep it defied human understanding. The visions I had just witnessed burned within me, filling me with both sorrow and hope. I had seen the hidden history, the stolen identity, the oppression that had lasted for centuries. But I had also seen something else, something greater. I had seen redemption. I had seen a future where truth shattered deception, where those who had been lost were found, where those who had been broken were restored. And now, Jesus was about to reveal the final part of what he had brought me here to see. I felt a shift around me, like the air itself was changing. The vision before me transformed, and I saw the world as it is today. The chaos, the division, the distractions, the endless pursuit of things that did not matter. I saw a world that had forgotten its creator, a world that had placed its trust in systems that were never meant to last. I saw people consumed by materialism, enslaved by ideologies, deceived into believing that they had all the answers when, in reality, they were further from the truth than ever before. But within the darkness, I saw a light beginning to grow. It was small at first, like embers barely holding onto their fire. But as I watched, the embers began to ignite. I saw people waking up, their eyes widening with recognition, their hearts beating with a new understanding. The truth was returning, and those who had been silenced were beginning to speak again. I saw the descendants of those who had suffered, those who had been scattered, those who had been told they were nothing, beginning to remember who they were. They were rising, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in wisdom. They were stepping into their purpose, reconnecting with their Creator, embracing the identity that had been hidden from them. I saw them breaking free from mental and spiritual bondage, casting off the lies that had defined them for generations. Jesus showed me how this awakening would spread. It would not come through institutions or governments. It would not be broadcast by those in power. It would happen in the hearts of individuals, in families, in small communities. It would move like a quiet storm, unseen at first but unstoppable once it began. The world would resist it, the enemy would try to suppress it, but it could not be stopped. The truth had been buried for centuries, but now it was rising again, stronger than before. I saw that this was not just about one group of people, it was about the world as a whole. When one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. When truth is hidden from one group, the entire world is affected. The deception that had been placed over these people was part of a larger plan to deceive all of humanity. The systems that had been built on their oppression had also enslaved others in different ways. The world had been trapped in a cycle of falsehood, and only truth could break it. I saw how the awakening of these people would trigger something far greater. It was not just about reclaiming history or identity, it was about realigning humanity with its creator. This was about a divine restoration, a returning to the original design, a breaking of the chains that had kept people bound for far too long. The deception had not just been about race or history, it had been about keeping all of humanity from knowing the truth about who they were and who God truly is. Jesus showed me that the battle was not against flesh and blood but against the forces that had worked tirelessly to keep people in darkness. This was about more than oppression, this was about a war for the souls of mankind. I saw the world shaking, the systems that had ruled for centuries beginning to crumble. The deception that had kept people blind was losing its power. But with the breaking of deception came a choice. People would have to decide whether they wanted to embrace the truth or cling to the comfortable lies they had always known. Some would resist, fighting to keep the world as it was, unwilling to accept that they had been misled. Others would surrender, letting the light expose everything they had once believed, allowing themselves to be transformed. I saw that this awakening was not just about knowledge, it was about action. It was not enough to simply know the truth, people would have to live it. They would have to let go of the divisions that had been placed between them. They would have to reject the hatred, the prejudices, the false narratives that had been used to keep them apart. They would have to choose love, even when it was difficult. They would have to walk in righteousness, even when the world pushed against them. Jesus showed me that this was the fulfillment of something long prophesied. The return of a people, the restoration of truth, the breaking of chains, this had been written long before the world had ever sought to erase it. It had always been a part of God's plan. The suffering had not been in vain. The oppression had not been without purpose. The enemy had tried to destroy them, but instead, they had been refined, strengthened, prepared for this very moment. I saw the final moments of history, the world as it reached its breaking point. The darkness would not go down without a fight. There would be struggles, battles fought not with weapons, but with truth and deception, love and hatred, faith and fear. But in the end, light would overcome. The enemy had built an empire on lies, but all it would take was truth to bring it crashing down. I saw the people who had been forgotten standing in the light, their voices no longer silenced, their power no longer suppressed. I saw them leading, not as rulers, but as guides, as those who had been through the fire and come out refined. I saw them teaching the world what had been lost, restoring what had been broken, revealing what had been hidden. They had been placed at the bottom for so long, but now, they were stepping into their rightful place, not in arrogance but in divine purpose. Jesus looked at me, and I understood. This was not just a vision for me to see, it was a message for the world to hear. This was not about personal revelation, it was about responsibility. Those who received this truth could no longer live as they had before. They had to share it. They had to live it. They had to be the light in the darkness. I realized that the time was now. The awakening was already beginning. The truth was already rising. The only question that remained was whether people would recognize it when it came. Whether they would embrace it, or turn away. Whether they would choose to be part of what God was doing, or remain trapped in the lies that had ruled the world for so long. Jesus had shown me everything. And now, I understood why.